Hello, this is part 2 of our comparative Bible study on Jesus attending the Passover before John the Baptist was put in prison. During this part, we'll begin talking about Jesus throwing the merchants out of the temple. Overall, this is our 27th New Testament Bible study. This is about where we left off at the end of the last Bible study. Jesus had went up to Jerusalem for the Passover, which is also known as the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Here in Exodus chapter 23, we're told that this is one of the 3 feasts that they were required to appear before the Lord every year. Let's talk a little bit more about the requirements of the Passover. In Deuteronomy 16, we're told that the Passover required a sacrifice of the flock and of the herd, and they were supposed to sacrifice it in the place which the Lord shall choose to place his name there. They could not sacrifice it where they lived within their own gates. It had to be at the place that the Lord thy God would choose. That's where they're supposed to sacrifice it, and that's where they're supposed to roast and eat it. So where is this place that the Lord would choose? As we discussed in New Testament Bible Study 12, there were many synagogues in Israel, but there was only one temple, and that temple was in Jerusalem, and that is the place that the Lord chose. So these feasts and sacrifices needed to be conducted in Jerusalem at the temple, no matter where any of the children of Israel lived in Israel. Let's move on with the main text. Picking up at the end of verse 13, Jesus went up to Jerusalem and found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves, and the changers of money sitting. And when he had made a scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overthrew the tables, and said unto them that sold doves, Take these things hence, make not my Father's house an house of merchandise. This is not the only account of Jesus driving those who bought and sold from the temple. As a reminder, this is at the beginning of his earthly ministry, after he's been baptized, after he's turned the water into wine. Later, at the end of Jesus' earthly ministry, right before his crucifixion, when he attended that Passover, there are 3 more accounts in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke that also speak of Jesus driving those who bought and sold from the temple. We would like to compare those towards the end of this Bible study. At first, let's take a closer look at the passage we just read. So what is it that they did wrong here? What is the Lord Jesus teaching us? The Lord Jesus had said, Make not my Father's house an house of merchandise. Is merchandise, buying and selling, being a merchant in itself bad? Well, I don't know. Let's look at a comparative Bible verse in Matthew 13. There, the Lord Jesus compared the kingdom of heaven to a merchant man, as we read in verse 45. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a merchant man seeking goodly pearls. Or maybe what they did wrong had more to do with selling oxen and sheep and doves and things that might be used in sacrifices. I don't know about that either. Let's do a comparison to the Old Testament Mosaic law. In Deuteronomy 14, we're told of how they were to conduct themselves with tithes of corn and wine and oil, and also the firstlings of their herds and their flocks. Similar to the passages that we read earlier concerning the Passover, these offerings also required eating before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose to place his name there, which would eventually be Jerusalem in the temple. But later in this passage, I've highlighted some interesting information in purple. Jerusalem, where the temple was, could be multiple days' journey from some Israelites. Here it states, If the place be too far from thee, which the Lord thy God shall choose to set his name there, when the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, then shalt thou turn it into money, and bind up the money in thine hand, and shalt go unto the place which the Lord thy God shall choose, and thou shalt bestow that money for whatsoever thy soul lusteth after, for oxen, or for sheep, or for wine, or for strong drink, or for whatsoever thy soul desireth, and thou shalt eat there before the Lord thy God. It appears that if someone lived too far from Jerusalem, they could take those tithes of corn, wine, and oil, and firstlings of herds and flock, sell them for money, and then take that money to Jerusalem, this long journey, and buy other things to sacrifice and eat when they got to Jerusalem, such as oxen and sheep. Here in our main text, we're told that they sold oxen and sheep, similar to that which they could buy in Deuteronomy 14. Also, we're told that they sold doves. As you recall in New Testament Bible studies 12 and 13, Mary, the Lord's mother, offered either 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons for her purification after giving birth to the Lord Jesus. So if the law allowed the purchase of things like oxen and sheep for sacrifice and worship, what is the reason for Jesus driving them out of the temple? Could it be the location they were selling them? In the temple? Let's look again at what the Lord Jesus said. He said, "Make not my Father's house an house of merchandise." They were selling the things in the temple. As a comparison, let's compare this account in the Gospel of John, which is at the beginning of Jesus' earthly ministry, to the accounts in the other Gospels at the end of Jesus' earthly ministry. In Matthew 21, after Jesus enters Jerusalem with an ass and a colt, after they've strewn their garments and palm branches in front of him, it records that, picking up in verse 12, we read, "And Jesus went into the temple of God, and cast out all them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers, and the seats of them that sold doves, and said unto them, It is written, My house shall be called the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves." There are some similarities here, but one of the main differences is what Jesus said in response. "It is written, My house shall be called the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves." Regarding an house of prayer, Isaiah 56 states, "Even them will I bring to my holy mountain, and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted upon mine altar, for mine house shall be called an house of prayer for all people." Regarding the issue of where they were selling, in the temple, it does seem that Jesus is focusing on the location, my house, that it should be a house of prayer, not a place of merchandise, and certainly not a den of thieves. Here Jesus is using much stronger language, den of thieves. Could it be that at the end of Jesus' ministry, the things even got worse, maybe price gouging, fraud, extortion, for him to use this stronger word thieves at this later time? Let's look now at the Gospel of Mark. Also, just prior to Jesus' crucifixion, the Gospel of Mark records that Jesus came from Bethany, and picking up in verse 15, "And they come to Jerusalem, and Jesus went into the temple, and began to cast out them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers, and the seats of them that sold doves, and would not suffer that any man should carry any vessel through the temple. And he taught, saying unto them, Is it not written, My house shall be called of all nations the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves." The account in the Gospel of Mark is very similar to the Gospel of Matthew, except for this additional part that I've highlighted in yellow here. Let's look at the Gospel of Luke, which is about the same time period just before Jesus' crucifixion. In chapter 19, picking up in verse 45, we read, "And he went into the temple, and began to cast out them that sold therein, and them that bought, saying unto them, It is written, My house is the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves." So the Gospels of Mark and Luke are similar to that of Matthew in noting that God's house should be a house of prayer. Moving to the next verse in the Gospel of John, in chapter 2, verse 17, we read, "And his disciples remembered that it was written, The zeal of thine house hath eaten me up." So again, the emphasis on the Father's house. Lord willing, maybe we'll have another Bible study in the future.